When dolls blink. It was a quiet afternoon when I found her, the doll. It wasn't the kind of discovery you'd expect to change everything, but it did. I remember the air in the basement being thick, musty, the kind of stifling heat that sits in old houses, like the dust in the air, heavy and unmoving. The floorboards creaked under my bare feet as I wandered through the clutter, lost in a maze of forgotten things. Boxes of old clothes, stacks of magazines that hadn't seen light in years, and strange, broken furniture that probably once had a purpose. But it wasn't any of that grabbed my attention. It was the doll, sitting on a shelf in the farthest corner, hidden under a faded, moth-eaten blanket. I'd been down there before, looking for stuff to play with, but I'd never seen her. It was like she'd just appeared out of nowhere, waiting, almost as if she knew I'd come for her. I don't remember what drew me in exactly. Maybe it was the porcelain skin, cracked in places, or the hauntingly lifelike eyes. They were too big for her face, and the way they stared up at me, it was unsettling, but in a way that kept me from looking away. I don't know why I decided to take her upstairs, but I did. The basement door slammed behind me as I left, the sound of it echoing down the hall like a warning. The moment I set her on my dresser in the bedroom, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The room seemed a little colder, the shadows in the corners darker, like they were trying to reach out and touch me. I shrugged it off, just my imagination, right? But something wasn't right. Little things started to happen. At first, it was small stuff, things shifting ever so slightly, like the lamp that wasn't in the exact spot I remembered it, or the books on the shelf that had somehow moved just a bit to the left. Nothing too big, but it was enough to make me feel unsettled. And then, it started. The door to my room, which I always made sure was closed, would creak open in the middle of the night. I'd wake up, groggy, and there it would be, just slightly ajar, the dark hallway beyond. Sometimes I'd hear noises from the hallway, footsteps, soft and slow, like someone was standing outside, waiting for me to come out. I never did. But the worst part, the part that still haunts me, was the laughter. It was faint at first, a distant, echoing giggle that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. It wasn't like any laugh I'd ever heard before. It was high-pitched, almost childlike, but with an edge to it. A twisted edge. At some point, I started avoiding my own room. I'd make excuses, stay downstairs longer, or pretend to be asleep when my parents knocked on the door. But it didn't stop. One night, I woke up to that soft, eerie giggle again, and this time, it was closer. It was right next to me. I could feel the weight of someone, or something, standing at the foot of my bed. And then, I heard it. A soft, raspy voice whispering my name. I froze, too terrified to move, not even sure if I was dreaming or awake. The laughter continued, and it was getting louder. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying it would stop, but it didn't. Instead, there was the sound of something, or someone, scraping along the floor, coming closer and closer. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, everything stopped. The room fell deathly silent. The air felt heavier than it had before, as though the room itself was holding its breath. And then, I opened my eyes. That was when I saw it. The doll. Her eyes. They were blinking. I know what you're thinking. How could that be possible? Those eyes were glass. Solid. Lifeless. But they were moving, slowly, deliberately. One at a time, they blinked, first the left, then the right, in a rhythmic, unnerving way. I couldn't breathe. My heart was pounding in my chest, so loud that I thought it might drown out the sound of my own thoughts. I blinked, hard, just to make sure I wasn't imagining things. But there she was, sitting perfectly still on my dresser, her eyes open wide as ever, staring directly at me. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't scream. My throat was too tight. I couldn't move. I could only watch as the doll's eyes flicked back and forth, as though she were waiting. And then, the door to my room creaked open. I spun around, my pulse racing. It was my mother, standing in the doorway. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and fear. She must have seen my panic, because she rushed to me immediately, asking what was wrong. But I couldn't speak. I just pointed to the doll. "Mom," I whispered, my voice shaking. Her eyes, they blinked. My mother's eyes flicked to the dresser, then back at me, and I could see the hesitation in her face. She looked at the doll for a long, agonizing moment, then back at me. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The silence in the room felt suffocating, as though time itself had stopped. But then, my mother's voice broke the stillness, barely above a whisper. "It's just a doll, sweetheart. There's nothing to be afraid of." She picked it up, no hesitation, no fear, and placed it back on the shelf with a soft thud. But I saw something I'll never forget. As she turned to leave, I caught the faintest flicker of her eyes, just a quick flash, like she knew, too. Like she had always known. As my mother left the room, the door clicked shut behind her, but that strange feeling didn't go away. It only grew, clinging to me like a shadow that wouldn't let go. And then, just as I thought I might finally get some sleep, I heard it again. The faintest of giggles. The giggle was soft at first, like a breath of wind slipping through the cracks in the walls, but it grew louder, closer. My heart began to race again, the pulse hammering in my ears, drowning out everything else. I could feel the weight of the room pressing down on me, every corner heavy with an energy I couldn't explain. It wasn't just fear, it was something more, something older, something I couldn't name. It felt like the walls themselves were alive, watching, waiting for me to do something, anything, to break the silence. I turned my head toward the dresser. The doll was still there, sitting perfectly still as if nothing had happened. But I couldn't shake the image of its eyes, blinking, slow and deliberate, like it was making a choice, studying me. I pulled the blankets up around my shoulders, trying to block out the noise, but the giggle came again, sharper this time, like someone was whispering right next to my ear. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run out of the room, but my body refused to move, paralyzed by something I couldn't see. I had to know what was happening. I had to see it for myself, even though every part of me screamed not to. I reached out, my fingers trembling as I slowly pulled the covers away and slipped my feet onto the cold floor. The shadows in the room seemed to grow longer, curling around the furniture, creeping toward me like they were alive. My breath was shallow, too fast, as I moved toward the dresser. Each step felt like it took longer than the last, and when I finally stood in front of the doll, I couldn't bring myself to touch it. I stared at her for what felt like hours, my eyes burning, my body stiff with dread. But nothing happened. The doll remained motionless, its wide eyes staring ahead, unblinking. I let out a slow breath, feeling the tension in my chest ease, just a little. Maybe it was just my imagination. Maybe I had imagined the whole thing. The giggles, the laughter, the eyes blinking. Maybe it was all in my head. But then, I saw it. The faintest shimmer in the doll's eyes. A glint, almost like they were wet, like they were alive. I recoiled in horror, stumbling backward, my mind spinning. It wasn't possible. I was just tired. My nerves were frayed. I had to be imagining things. I turned to leave, to get away from it all, but just as I reached for the door, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, dragging across the floor behind me. I whirled around, panic rising in my throat. There was no one there. The room was empty. But the footsteps didn't stop. They kept coming. Closer and closer, until they were almost right behind me. My heart pounded in my chest as I spun around, desperate to find the source of the sound, but the room was still. The air felt too thick to breathe, too heavy to move. And then, that giggle again. Louder. Clearer. "Who's there?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the noise in my head. The footsteps stopped. The giggle stopped. Everything stopped. The room was silent, eerily silent. I stood there, frozen, the door to my room wide open, the hallway beyond dark and empty. And then I heard something else, something I wasn't ready for. The soft scrape of porcelain against wood. I spun around. The doll. It was no longer sitting on the dresser. It was halfway across the room, the tips of its porcelain feet just touching the floor. How had it moved? How could it move? It didn't make sense. Dolls didn't move. They couldn't. But there it was, inching closer toward me, one slow, deliberate movement at a time. I felt my legs go weak beneath me. I wanted to run, to scream, to break the silence with anything, but I couldn't. I was trapped, caught in some twisted nightmare where logic and reason had no place. I reached for the door, my hand shaking uncontrollably, but before I could even touch the handle, I felt it, like someone had placed a cold hand on my shoulder. I froze. It was a touch, light but firm, like someone was trying to hold me in place. And then, in the reflection of the dark window, I saw it, an image of the doll, its eyes staring directly at me, but they were different now. They weren't the glassy, lifeless eyes I had seen before. They were alive, filled with a dark, inhuman gleam. It was as if the doll was grinning at me, mocking me, knowing that it had me right where it wanted me. "Mom," I managed to whisper, but the word barely left my mouth before it was snatched away by the cold air that filled the room. I spun around, desperate for her to hear me, but the footsteps in the hallway had stopped, and the house was as still as death. No one was coming. No one could hear me. I turned back to the doll. It was now standing on its own. And then it blinked again. This time, its eyes didn't just blink, they looked around the room, like it was searching for something. It was looking at me. I staggered back, my breath coming in sharp gasps. I wanted to scream, but the words wouldn't come. I wanted to run, to hide, but I couldn't move. The doll, no, it was alive, and it knew it. It knew that I was scared, and it thrived on it. The silence in the room was unbearable. The air was thick with the weight of something ancient, something wrong. I had to leave. I had to get out of that room, out of that house, out of whatever it was that was inside that doll. But just as I turned to escape, I saw the last thing I ever wanted to see. A shadow in the doorway. A figure that wasn't my mother. It was something else. Something worse. And that laugh, oh, that terrible, twisted laugh, came again, filling the room, echoing in my ears, drowning me in its madness. I didn't get out. The shadow in the doorway grew, stretching out into the room like it was reaching for me. I didn't have to see its face to know it wasn't human. There was something wrong with the way it moved, something unnatural, like it was sliding through the air rather than walking. My legs finally gave out, and I collapsed to the floor, scrambling backward on my hands and knees, desperate to get away from it. But no matter how much space I tried to put between us, it didn't feel like I was getting any closer to the door, to freedom. The room was closing in, its walls pressing in on me with an invisible force that seemed to grow stronger with each breath I took. The figure didn't speak. It didn't need to. Its presence alone was enough to paralyze me with fear. I could feel its eyes on me, or at least, I imagined I could. It was like something was watching me from the corners of the room, from the very air itself, and it wasn't a person. It was something else, something dark and ancient, something that shouldn't exist. But there it was, in my room, in my house, and it was getting closer, its movements slow and deliberate. My skin crawled with the sensation of its gaze, like 1,000 icy needles prickling my flesh. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to leave, but the door was too far away. It was like the room had stretched, the hallway beyond it pulling further and further from me, as though the house itself was trying to trap me, to swallow me whole. Panic rose up in my throat like a choking wave, and I gasped for air, my vision blurring as I struggled to focus. Everything around me seemed to shift and twist, the walls warping, the light flickering and dimming as if the very fabric of reality was coming apart at the seams. Then, in the midst of my terror, I heard something else. A soft thud, followed by a sharp scrape. It was coming from the dresser. I didn't want to look, didn't want to see it, but I couldn't help myself. My eyes were drawn to the place where the doll had once been. And there it was. It was standing once again, but it wasn't just standing, it was moving. Its porcelain feet shifted, its limbs jerking in unnatural, sharp movements like they were being controlled by invisible strings. The doll's eyes, those cursed, glassy eyes, stared right at me, unblinking, wide and eerie, as though they were searching for something in me, trying to find my weakness, my fear. I felt the air grow colder, the temperature in the room plummeting as if the doll was drawing all the warmth out of the space. The shadows around it deepened, swirling like a storm, as if they were coming to life. The giggling returned, only now it wasn't soft. It wasn't distant. It was right there, in my ear, laughing at me, mocking me, as if I were some kind of plaything for whatever force had taken control of that porcelain figure. The sound made my stomach twist with nausea. I wanted to scream, but the words got stuck in my throat. It felt like the room itself had become a living nightmare, a place where nothing made sense, where nothing was real, and where every instinct told me to run, but my body refused to obey. My eyes darted around, looking for anything, any way out of this madness, but all I saw was the doll, its eyes glowing now, a sickly, unnatural light emanating from them, as if they were absorbing all the darkness around it. Then, without warning, the figure in the doorway moved. It didn't walk. It didn't step. It simply shifted, sliding through the air as though gravity had no hold on it. It came closer, until it was standing over me, blocking my only escape. I couldn't see its face. I didn't want to see its face. But I felt it, a presence so heavy, so oppressive, that I could barely breathe. It leaned in closer, and in that moment, I could hear something else, a low, guttural whisper, like a voice from the depths of the earth, from the very core of the darkness. The words were incomprehensible, but they didn't need to be. I could feel them, deep in my chest, like they were vibrating inside me, rattling my bones. The doll's laughter filled the room again, louder now, more manic, like a chorus of voices all layered on top of each other, each one a different pitch, a different tone. It was driving me to the edge of insanity, and I could feel the last threads of my own sanity slipping away. My heart pounded in my ears, my head spinning as I tried to make sense of what was happening, but it didn't make sense. It never would. I was caught in a nightmare, and there was no waking up from it. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, everything stopped. The laughter. The figure. The shadows. The room went silent, so silent that I could hear the pounding of my own heart. I stared at the doll, still standing in the middle of the room, its eyes fixed on me with that same unblinking, knowing gaze. The figure in the doorway was gone, vanishing like smoke in the wind, leaving nothing behind but the lingering sense of dread. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I was trapped, caught in the grip of something I didn't understand, something I couldn't escape. And then I heard it again, the soft giggle, closer this time, like it was right next to me. But this time, it wasn't the doll. It wasn't the figure. It was something far worse. It was coming from behind me. I didn't look. I didn't want to look. But I could feel it, a presence so cold it burned, creeping up my spine, inch by inch, until it was standing behind me, its breath on my neck. The giggle turned into a laugh, and then, a voice, low and mocking, whispered in my ear. "You're mine now." And with that, everything went dark.